From the new recording lair located deep beneath the Wine and Spirit store in Ephrata, Pennsylvania.
You're listening to the Masonic Light Podcast.
Studio 665 presents Masonic Light Podcast. This show is recorded by Masons, for Masons, and is for entertainment purposes only. And please, no wagering.
This podcast is not endorsed by any Grand Lodge, and the ridiculous ramblings of the hosts are their own. And now, here's your host.
Welcome, everybody. We're here at the Masonic Light Podcast, episode 126. Tonight, we're very
26.
Wait, what, is that the real number or is that the estimated number?
That's the one that you guys told me 5 seconds ago. We have a great show, hopefully, tonight. World-renowned author John Dickie is here tonight. And Jack's a big fan. So Jack's, if you haven't read his stuff, Jack's going to help us along. And so what we're going to do, guys, let's just go around and see what everybody's been up to. So, Tim, you're first because you're next on my screen. What have you been up to Masonically?
Well, since we recorded our last episode, I participated in a Saturday event at the Valley of Harrisburg, where we had a stated meeting and then excused ourselves to a fish fry, and then excused ourselves from that to a cigar smoker outside. Had great attendance at that. Had a great time. So that was great. Samuel C. Perkins Royal Arch Chapter conferred, or we were planning to confer a Mark Master degree. The candidate didn't show up, so we just ended up having a meeting. And then this past week, I was honored to speak at Robert Burns Lodge in Harrisburg. I was their featured speaker of the evening. And so the program was on Freemasonry's Guide to Living as found in the Masonic Charges. So that's pretty much what I've been up to for the past week or past couple of weeks, other than answering lots of questions from lodge secretaries about Grandview, but we won't go any further into that right now.
Jack, what have you been up to?
Well, a little inconvenience called Lodge in the Woods.
Oh yeah, I went to that too.
That was my big event. Every 2 years, we hold an event at a local scout camp because they have the biggest roof in the neighborhood. And we had, I think, total attendance was about 130. We had 170 tickets sold. So there was some leftover dinners, but it was a really nice time. The Grand Master was piped in with a pipe and drum, and we did it under roof this time. Ordinarily, we do it outside around the camp fire circle, and there was a threat of rain, so we just decided to stay under roof, and it was a good thing we did because
that threat became real.
That threat became real. It didn't last long, but boy, it came down hard for a couple of minutes. Right while the senior deacon was giving the closing charge for the meeting, it didn't matter that he worked so hard to learn it. You couldn't hear a word of it because it was raining so hard. But he did a really nice job, and so it was a great event. We do it every 2 years. I started at my year as Worshipful Master in 2009, and I've done it now. This is the 7th. So I'm going to pass the torch along to anybody dumb enough to reach out.
Or make eye contact.
Yeah, eye contact is a big thing. Yeah. But yeah, that was it pretty much. Always welcoming the new guys in Masonic education and stuff. So,
Brother Josh, what's going on in Lancaster?
Not really too much. Still got the merger committee doing their work. I too went to Lodge of the Woods and helped out with that. Worshipful Master John Mertz did a great job was nice to see everybody. But other than that, not really a whole lot.
Larry, what have you been up to? How's your health?
Yeah. Funny you should ask that.
Yeah, funny you should ask that. Yeah, I spent the afternoon at the doctor's office, the heart guy. But anyway, that's irrelevant. What's been going on? Let's see. Merger committee. It was a gridiron merger committee. It's pretty much the same day in, day out.
Like the real world.
Brother John Dickie, have you done anything in the Masonic world in the past couple of weeks?
Well, not being a brother, it'd be quite difficult for me to do anything Masonic. But I have, I'm preparing for the launch of my book in Italy, and I had a public debate with a guy, you call him a district attorney, I suppose, the equivalent in Italy, sort of prosecutor, who's involved in a very big and very important case trying to establish links between the Freemasons and the mafia in Calabria. Very interesting story. I talk about it a little bit in the book. Case seems to have deflated somewhat. And I had a bit of a chat with the Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Italy, who was interested in a newspaper article I'd written and who said he was going to read the book as soon as it came out in Italy, and with a very good friend who is in the other major obedience, as they call them in Italy, the Grand Lodge of Italy, who is a woman, Joy Avvantaggiato, her name is. You will have gathered that the Grand Lodge of Italy is admits women, mixed lodge meetings and so on. And we were talking about how we could try and get the Masonic world in Italy talking about my book. So those were the conversations.
Very cool. My grandmother's from Calabria, so I need to dig into it.
Interesting. Wow. Whereabouts?
I am not sure. I know more about my grandfather's side, and I still have the same house in Santomero, Abruzzi. But
okay,
yeah, they just used to call my grandmother's side a bunch of hillbillies and like hard-headed because they're from a rougher part of the country.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of hills in Calabria. It's pretty much all hills. So, be interested to find out where they're from. I mean, a lot of Calabrians came over for sort of mining and stuff in the beginning of the 20th century in Pennsylvania. Is that where your folks came from?
Yeah, I mean, my family all came over here in the 1920s. I mean, I guess Italy had to be really rough. And then you come over here and you hit the Great Depression. So they had some real bad luck there. But, yeah, I don't know. My grandfather was a shoemaker until then he started getting into his own business. At one point, he owned a very big national trucking company called Mushroom Transportation. These all orange trucks, which are now, I forget what company it is now, but you see it's much bigger now. And if you see all orange tractor trailers on the road, that used to be my grandfather's company.
Wow.
So me, I have the Pennsylvania Grotto Association, PGA Fall, whatever you want to call it, in October. I'm the president of Pennsylvania, and that's what I call it. October 15, 16, 17. So please come on out for that. We're going to be putting on another bogus degree called the Order of Golden Leaf and Barley. So if you can figure that out, we're going to smoke cigars and drink whiskey.
It's very important that we have a degree to support this activity. Yes.
And really, that's about it. I've been kind of laying low, running back and forth doctor's appointments. And then I had a spare moment. So the Doberman Rescue told me to go get this dog. There was a puppy mill in Louisiana, so southern United States. I don't know the total amount of dogs that they rescued, but the breed that I deal with, Dobermans, they were 70 Dobermans pulled out of this puppy mill.
Wow.
I think the total was 400 dogs. And this little girl, I would be embarrassed if I took her for a walk or to a pet store. People would call the police because they think she's all skin and bones. But she's been over here for 2 months, and they have actually put weight on her. So my job is to try and get her to act
Was
like
she a hurricane
dog.
rescue? Is that a hurricane rescue thing, Pete, or just in general?
The hurricane was the impetus of this, but these people were still not very good pet people. You'll see a kennel that should be one dog, and there's 5 big dogs in it. And this little girl, she's less than 18 months old, and she's already had 2 litters of puppies. Wow. So she's happy to be here playing with my 2 big idiots. But that's it. So we'll take a quick break. We're going to come back, and Jack's going to lead our discussion with author John Dickie.
Why choose George J. Grove & Sons for your next home improvement project? At George J. Grove & Sons, we've built our reputation on quality and trust for more than 50 years. From planning to materials to installation, George J. Grove promises a home improvement experience second to none. Whether your goal is reducing energy costs, decreasing maintenance, updating curb appeal, or simply increasing the value of your home, the George J. Grove team will recommend and provide solutions that stand the test of time. Call 717-393-0859 for an estimate or visit us at georgejgrove.com.
And we're back, and we have with us tonight a guest that I'm very excited about, John Dickie. John wrote recently wrote, 2 years ago, John? Was it released?
No, last year. A year ago. Yeah.
So it's called simply The Craft. But the subtitle, I think, really tells it all: How the Freemasons Made the Modern World. A lot of times you don't get the subtitle when you talk about a book, but I think that's the more important aspect of this, and what caught my eye. So, John, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself. How does an Italian scholar write a book about the English Freemasons?
Okay. My name's John Dickie. It's very, very nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's not over yet. Give it time.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that at the end of the show.
Let me think. Okay. My name is John Dickie. I'm Professor of Italian Studies at University College London. I'm a historian by profession. And yeah, it is quite a long route, it would seem, for somebody who's a non-Mason, although my grandfather was a Mason, into writing, spending 5 years of their life researching and writing a book which isn't just about English Freemasonry by any means.
Oh, true.
I mean, it travels the world. There are many chapters set in the United States, in Italy, in India, in France, in Germany, in Spain, episodes in Australia and various other parts of the world too. Really the story, I mean, it's got a funny story in a way. My claim to fame as a historian really is as a historian of Italian organized crime. I'm a historian of the mafia. And a good few years ago now, 6-7 years ago, they arrested a mafia boss, a Sicilian mafia boss, on the run in London. And he'd been and this never happens, He'd been living under an assumed name for God knows how long, nearly 20 years, as a kind of limousine driver between the centre of London and Heathrow Airport in this very anonymous suburb of London called Uxbridge. And they arrested him on pretty much in the middle of August, when nobody's around, there's no news, Parliament is empty, nothing is happening.
They're all in Italy on holiday.
Yeah, they're all in Italy on holiday. They call it the silly season. Okay, right. So it was prime silly season when they're desperate for news, and of course all the media leapt on this big time. The huge story. So I spent 2 days camped out in every news studio and radio station in London doing the rounds. And what people would ask is, what is the mafia? And my standard reply is echoing the words of members of the Sicilian mafia who've turned state's evidence. They will say, well, it's like a Freemasonry for criminals. So now, so I can. That's a definition I can defend to some extent. We could talk about that, but clearly your reaction was the reaction shared by the then head of communications of the United Grand Lodge of England, a very nice guy, sadly now departed, called Mike Baker.
It's the same reaction. It's the same reaction I had when I got to the Lucifer section of Morals and Dogma. Just, oh God, no! Did you really have to? No. There's a better way to say it.
Wow, you're heroic getting that far into Morals and Dogma, I have to say. But anyway, so anyway, at the end of the day, I get back home and I find an email in my inbox from the United Grand Lodge of England saying, a number of members have been expressing concern. Would you like to come in for a chat? Which, of course, I did. I leapt at the chance, and I got the tour of the museum and the discussion and everything with their resident archivist, John Hamill, and historian, and so on. And it was obviously cleared up very quickly because, but that's what first made me think, well, hang on, I think there's a book here. I knew I wasn't starting from scratch on Freemasonry. I knew a fair bit about the history of Freemasonry in Italy already, but I wanted to make it, much more international book. Let me defend that definition before I get bombarded with more emails by your listeners. Okay,
because Pete's got friends that could get, they could.
Yeah. No, I get seriously angry. Well, either the mafia or the Freemasons get very, very angry about this. But yeah, it's an explanation used by mafiosi themselves, and it has a certain amount of truth to it in two ways. Obviously, Freemasonry and the Mafia have very, very different value systems, shall we say. But as a template for an organization, they're really quite similar in the sense that as a member of the Sicilian Mafia, I'm talking strictly in Sicilian terms here rather than the American sister organization, you join a family. And a family is a metaphor. It's not they're not all related by any means. In fact, the Sicilian Mafia has a rule that you can't have more than 2 members of the same family in the same family with a capital F. It's a metaphor for a cell of the organization, which takes the name from the place where it's based. Okay? Like you might join a local lodge. But then, and that lodge has its hierarchy, its boss, its, officers and so on. But then joining that lodge also gives you credentials that gives you access to a much wider network. Yeah. And that membership comes through rituals, through imbibing stories and lessons, through taking bloodthirsty oaths. And the similarity is undeniable, I think, in formal terms, but it's also not coincidental. And this is one of the stories I tell in my book, because in the early 19th century, in the sort of revolutionary cauldron of southern Italy, the kind of circumstances that led to Italy becoming a united country in 1860, Freemasonry was very politicized. It gave birth to quasi-Masonic secret societies that were deeply involved in revolutionary politics, trying to overthrow the absolutist regimes and create a united Italy. And if you're going to make a revolution, you need men of violence. And they recruited men of violence. And those men of violence, after Italian unification, having learnt how to organize themselves as a secret society, coalesced into the mafia.
So we call them past masters now. Just saying.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you launched into this. Your book is more than just about that aspect of it. It's really,
of course, yeah.
Really encompassing book of the history of Freemasonry, its foundations, pre-Grand Lodge, Grand Lodge, post-Grand Lodge, and ancients. I mean, if there's a Masonic topic that you're curious about, that's commonly talked about, it's probably in this book. The Morgan Affair, P2, which we really don't like to talk about at all, and just the whole of it. It's I don't know. I'm gonna draw Larry in because he's in a coma right now.
Larry, if I may, you're saying you're making Larry's probably in a coma because you're making it sound like an encyclopedia, which it isn't.
No.
It's a book full of stories.
It reads like a novel almost about the subject of Freemasonry, which is really cool. And Larry, your thoughts when you first read it? Let's hear you.
Well, when I first read it, I was totally enchanted with your background and your history of the real beginnings of Freemasonry coming from Scotland. And I have believed that for 30, 40 years that we came there before the English lodges were opening up. And I knew that in the late 1500s that was happening. And historically, there was so much there. And I thought the way you treated that was excellent. I was excited about that. I enjoyed that part of it. Then as I continued to read, I was totally fascinated by the Carbonara and that almost similar affiliation between Freemasonry. Not that they were, or they could have been, who knows, really.
So let's talk about what he was talking about. Let's go to that Italian, the carbonara, or coal miners.
Carbonara, just to clarify, is a pasta dish that has nothing to do with Freemasonry. It's the carbonari who are there.
Carbonari, sorry.
That's. We can talk. I can talk carbonara till the cows come home, but because I also wrote a history of Italian food. But I think we better stick on message.
I was getting extremely confused because the Italian state police are the
Carabinieri. Yeah,
and and here we go with the carbonara, the sauce, and with the carbonari.
It's okay, Larry. You'll be okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
But it was great. It was really
really nice of you to say. But
let's use Larry's introduction of that topic back into your transitioning from the Italian Masonic connection to the broader content of the book, because I don't want to just focus on any singular aspect of the book. Let's kind of, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here to talk about.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
I know Larry. It sounded like Larry was building up to a lovely big butt with some criticisms to follow, which I'm really interested. I'm really interested to hear.
Thank Jack for taking the wind out of
there have
that
been
one.
criticisms of the book in the States, and I'm really looking forward to kind of engaging with those. But let's deal with the Carbonari. Brilliant. I mean, what happened in Italy was a massive injection of politics of various kinds into the Masonic tradition. First of all, the Catholic Church hates Freemasonry. Okay, Freemasons are Satanists. They're excommunicated for the first time in 1738, as many of you will know already. And in the 19th century, everything goes wrong for the Catholic Church. You know, you get the French Revolution, you get the peasants leaving there, which is seems to them a kind of godless overthrowing of the divine order. You know, eventually the Pope loses his power on earth and is confined to the Vatican. Everything goes wrong, and the Church blames the Freemasons for everything, and they hate the Masons. At the same time, Napoleon basically takes over the Freemasons and uses them as part of his regime. These new men who associated with the Masonic state, the new generals, Napoleon creates career avenues for ambitious men and uses Masonic lodges as ways of binding them to the regime. It's almost like a sort of part of Napoleonic ideology. And that gets spread to Italy. And between those two forces and the restlessness of Italy in the early 19th century, which has a revolution every few years, you can set your clock by the revolutions in Italy in the early 19th century, Freemasonry gets caught up in that because it's one of the few places where you can do politics, where you have the freedom to do politics in an absolutist regime, which is what the various Italian states of the period were.
So did they really?
And that many Masonic lodges have as sort of sidecars these things called the Carbonari, who are the charcoal burners. Easier to refer to them like that. We don't get them confused with pasta dishes or policemen. And they are an avowedly revolutionary secret society that, again, are structured very, very like the Freemasons, with oaths and lodges and that sort of thing, who are dedicated to the cause of overthrowing the powers that be and creating a united Italy. And things get very violent, very corrupt, very tied up with spies and gangsters. I mean, it's a story that just turns in on itself so many times. Crazy. And at one point, the authorities in Naples tried to use another secret society to fight the secret societies that are growing up all around them. And at some point, one guy gives up and says, look, this is a collective mania, this secret society mania that has taken over southern Italian society. And that's this weird cauldron that the mafia eventually emerges from.
So you called me out for expressing your book as an encyclopedia, and certainly it's not. And I found it because I read a review of it, and I won't mention the reviewer, but I read a review of it, and it was absolutely scathing review of the book, and I said, oh well, I got to read that. Because
I'm glad it worked that way.
That's about W.C. Fields there. And
oh my goodness! So I got it and I read it and I told you before off. I think we were emailing back and forth, but I kind of understand where the aggravation came from in a couple of different aspects. But talk a little bit about how the book was received by Masonic scholars versus Masons.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, various professional historians have reviewed the book in the press, and they've been very, very kind about it. In that sense that they're, in journals and newspapers in Europe, but not just, in I have to say, by and large, in Masonic circles in not just in Britain, but in Germany, in Belgium. I've been invited next spring to the sort of annual general meeting of Belgian Freemasons to give a talk about, my views on the future of Freemasonry. I've twice been invited to, lecture by the United Grand Lodge of England, sort of nationally broadcast podcasts by them. There are copies of my book piled high in the bookshop in Freemasons Hall in Covent Garden, the HQ of English Freemasonry worldwide. So I've actually been amazed and delighted at the amount of dialogue that I've been able to have with Masons through this book. Not by no means always uncritical, but certainly a dialogue. Right. I don't think anybody's dismissed it as an anti-Masonic hatchet job. I went into this book wanting to have a discussion. And, if I can be serious for a moment, I've sat down with Freemasons from all over the world now over the course of writing this book. And one thing I noticed is you can't, and I very simply ask, what does Freemasonry mean to you? And it really doesn't take very long before the eyes start to moisten and people give you a sense of something really, really powerful in giving a shape to their lives and shaping their friendships and their connections and supporting them through things like COVID. And you can't encounter that and be flippant about Freemasonry or not try to explain the power of its attractions and so on and so forth. But a historian, hey, I also have to see the other sides of it, try and set it in context. And frankly, I also have to try and explain it to people like me, in a sense, who aren't Freemasons, whose starting point is, those guys are completely weird. What on earth is going on there? Yeah. Right. And you've got to start there. So if you're going to bring people along, you've got to start there. So that's the approach. I hope the book has some funny bits in it. Where certainly a few people found a lot of it quite funny. I mean, I thought that the Taxel hoax story is crazy.
You killed me.
Absolutely crazy.
I'm reading the whole thing and I'm thinking to myself, you have that second brain in your head that's reading along with you. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking to myself, come on, this is impossible. How can he be saying this? And then you get to the end of the section and it's like, yeah, right. Who could believe this? Yeah. And I just like, God. Oh, man.
Yeah. But the reason I was doing that as a historian is to try and give people a sense of why he was believed for so long. 12 years he went on and on with this stuff, and this slowly escalating craziness with, much of the Catholic Church, much of Catholic public opinion, and quite a few interested bystanders going with him. So to really sense that and not just laugh it off the table,
right?
You have to tell the story I think in the way I told it, with the reveal at the end.
Yeah, I swallowed the hook. All right, let's take a quick break.
That's great.
I think my brains are exploding here. Let's take a quick break. We'll talk to the people that make this possible, including our Patreons. Tim.
Yes.
What?
Imagine that.
Imagine that. We'll talk about our Patreons when we come back.
At the Historic Smithton Inn of Ephrata, Pennsylvania, we're pleased to serve the latest creations from Weathered Vineyard Winery, along with spirits from Thistlefinch Distillery in Lancaster, all to be experienced in the tasting room of a beautifully restored 18th century bed and breakfast. Cigars by D&S Cigar are available for your enjoyment in the courtyard. The Historic Smithton Inn is convenient to Lancaster County's most interesting attractions. Just minutes from the Ephrata Cloister and the Green Dragon Farmers Market. And a short drive can get you to charming Lidditz, thriving downtown Lancaster, as well as Hershey, Bird in Hand, and Intercourse, or Valley Forge and Gettysburg. Whether you're looking for a romantic getaway or an active vacation full of sightseeing and attractions, the Historic Smithton Inn will be a welcoming oasis from everyday life, one that you'll want to visit again and again. Stop in and visit at 900 West Main Street in Ephrata, Pennsylvania, or check out our website at historicsmithtoninn.com, or simply call us at 717-733-6094. Just ask for Pastmaster Dave.
And we're back. It is. We have so much fun. We really ought to record our breaks and do an outtakes at the end or something. But
I think we
in any case, as Jack said just before we went to break, this podcast lives because of you, our listeners, and especially because of the generous giving of our Patreons. Our patrons on Patreon. We're going to get that right one of these days. And for as little as $1 a month.
$1.
Just like 275,000 lira.
There you go. You can be a supporter of this podcast. We'll also take higher levels of patronage on patreon.com. Go to patreon.com/Masonic Light Podcast and make your contribution there. And so we discovered during the break that Larry wants to share his butt.
Oh, gee,
oh, seriously! In the middle of the last segment, Larry was going on with something, and there was an anticipated something coming, and so Larry didn't get to share that. Larry, you want to share your butt?
Yeah, our guest, John Dickie, world famous author. We were talking about the book itself and some of the things that I really enjoyed about it. And I was getting to the point where I was going to do butt. And then Jack came in and took it away from me. And actually, if I told you I forgot what the butt was, would you believe that? Actually, no. It was John. The book was fantastic. It was actually, I went to a goose and gridiron breakfast. And one of the brothers, Brian Hill, actually said, "Have you read The Craft?" I said, "No, I did not. What is it?" He told me about it. He just happened to have the hardcover edition in his hand, and he gave it to me to read. Well, then next thing you know, I talked to Jack, the book club, and it kind of snowballed from there. I gave Jack my opinion of the book, and for the most part, it was pretty solid. It was good. There were some areas that I thought it was hard for me to read, only because when we talked about World War II and the concentration camp, that's a hard one for me. It always has been. It's a difficult read. But when it came to the end of the book, here comes the but. Talking about Freemasonry is losing people. Things are happening to the craft. It's shrinking. I'm not saying it's shrinking and going out of business. That it will not do. But there are vast changes happening in Freemasonry throughout the world. But you came up with some recommendations. And one of the and some of them were good, but there was one that was
just some
had to do with maybe if Freemasonry would allow women to join. And that's the way I took it. And really, it's not a bad idea. But one of the things I remembered was I was a member of Lions Club International when we went through the debate of having women join the club, and we decided it was a good idea because we could grow and we could be stronger and better. Well, here we are 25, 30 years later. We haven't grown. We haven't been stronger as a Lion, as a Rotary. So it really, those ideals that we thought we might get in merging with women just didn't happen. So that was one of my critiques. And again, it was a small one, but
yeah. No, I mean, that's an absolutely ginormous butt, if I may say. I don't have a dog in this fight, I have to say. You know, I'm not a Freemason, but I get asked. And I was more interested in saying, you know, I made the point by looking at the story of the extraordinary story of how the Grand Orient of France decided after 250 years to admit women. And it was a man who changed sex, had the operation to become his true female self, who was already a Freemason of the Grand Orient, who convinced the Grand Orient to change its mind and admit women. And it was a fascinating story. She's a fascinating person to meet. Really, really thoughtful, smart Freemason with a great sense of Freemasonry's place in French life. And the fascinating thing about it was that she said, look, it is the lesson of what she was saying, it isn't just about admitting women. Because even if you admit women, there is a glass ceiling. There is a whole history of Freemasonry being a male association that isn't going to make life easy for women once they join. Yeah? You can't just open the doors and expect everything to be fine in that way.
Right.
The other part of the problem is, of course, that, hey, listen, the reason why a lot of Freemasons are Freemasons is because they like the fact that it's an all-male brotherhood.
Yep.
So there's, you know, as I said, I don't have any skin in the game. There are pros and cons of either side, but you know, if you were to ask me my advice, I think you know, ultimately you're going to have no choice as to whether to, you know, about embracing this change.
The book, though, the way the book reads, or at least the way I read the book, you don't really state that as a proposition.
No, exactly. Yeah,
you kind of leave it there as like, hey, you know, you kind of screwed up with, you know, African American people. Maybe you want to take another look at this female thing. And you know, that's just kind of how you leave it. And I like that about it because like Freemasonry, you know, everything is symbols and perception. So, you know, two people can read that same section and come away from your book with two completely different ideas about
Yeah, that's really kind of you to say that. Yeah, I didn't want to, you know, I wanted to tell the stories and allow, you know, get people thinking and discussing about it, I suppose, and going and weird.
Because of my comments, John, don't think I'm person as an individual that I'm against something like that. I have two daughters, and I know the things that they go through and went through to become successful.
Larry, you misogynist pig. That's far from it. Far from it.
Yeah.
So I'm saying it's something that, and I'm glad you brought it out in the book because it's something that we will be talking about.
Sure.
Really. And
you know, I would love to be a fly on the wall at the meeting of the Masons who told Prince Hall no in heaven, if they're there, assuming they're there, right? Just like, really, guys. Really, you know, and that's kind of how you write. I mean, it's a fun, it's a very readable conversational style, and that's rare for something as scholastic as this is, without being a sort of.
I mean, if I wanted to wade in and start wagging my finger at Freemasons and saying, "Listen, you're doing it all wrong." Then the one thing I really would give them a damn good finger wagging about is writing history. You know, there are ways you've got to write your history better. Because, you know,
there's with a W?
That said, that said,
right with a W or just
right, yeah. Because
so we have to rewrite
that said, there are some very, very, really very, very good Masonic historians out there. And Italy has many, many professional historians who are Freemasons who are really interesting. But that said, the general trend in Masonic history is to tell stories that say, hey, aren't we lovely? And don't people misunderstand us? And, it's all about, it's a team building exercise. It's not an exercise in research and storytelling. Even when it is about the mind, doing genuine research into the minutiae, the context is that we're doing this because this is precious and really worthwhile. And I think you have to tell stories that are going to put bums on seats, and tell stories that do the really hard work of writing history, which is the context, which is, not picking out Freemasons here and there from history, but actually putting it in a bigger picture and asking some harder questions. And that way, I think you have a lot more fun in your stories. Your stories become more readable to the outside world. Yeah, they're going to include dark as well as light, but, we might all rub along a bit better and have more fun along the way as a result. So there, my finger has been wagged.
We've been wagged.
I think
the butt has been addressed and the finger has been wagged.
The finger has wagged the butt, yes.
That's one of the things I think our show tries to do, is there's so many people out there talking about Freemasonry as if it's this high and mighty esoteric thing. And they'll always mention, famous Freemasons like in America, George Washington or Voltaire or somebody like that. But, they were kind of busy. How often did these guys actually attend lodge? So, in America, I would say 95% of the Masons are regular guys, any line of work, that just go and want to talk to their friends. And I think if we painted that more in that context, it would help us in recruiting. It would also probably put some people at ease who think that, my lodge isn't good enough because we just hang out and, we just help each other out financially or do this or that. But we're not writing great books or anything. Like, I don't know.
Well, we used to.
Some of us.
We used to write great books. We used to own huge industries. We used to control politics. We used to control religion. We used to, and by we, I mean Freemasonry as a whole, but we don't really anymore. We're all good guys and that's great, but
yeah, I think even the past, I think you're right. Pete, that Freemasonry all along has loved having recruiting posters with the Churchills and the Washingtons and the Garibaldis and people on. But you're absolutely right. They were too damn busy but Churchill particularly, I'm not even sure he took the third degree. But that hasn't stopped them using him as a sort of recruiting sergeant. And, likewise, Washington, the idea that, he made, during the American Wars of Independence was somehow a Masonic project, is largely an invention of 19th century Freemasons, when in Freemasonry's golden age, when they were just desperately trying to amp up Freemasonry's role in the American Revolution and the Wars of Independence and so on and so forth, and amp up the figure of George Washington. That if you go to the George Washington National Monument in Virginia, most of the stuff in there is, it's fascinating, but it's evidence of that later cult of George Washington rather than Washington's own life as a Freemason. Very similar things could be said about Garibaldi. The 19th century, when Freemasonry had been banned by the church for much of the early 19th century, Italian unification happens, lodges are suddenly freed, they can open up, and they start to make a big deal out of Garibaldi and claim that they had a much bigger role in the unification of Italy than they really did.
So if you go back to when those high characters, we'll call them just for a second, if you go back to the point in their lives where they actually affiliated with Freemasonry, what they were finding, I think, is a philosophical bubble that they could exist in philosophically, patriotically, revolutionarily. They had this umbrella of secrecy that they could exist under and flesh out these ideas. And I think that the fact that they were Freemasons is important because they at least had an opportunity to do that. A lot of revolutionaries don't get a chance to express that publicly because you get killed, right? Mm.
It's interesting that as we're talking with John here, I started reading a book. It's titled "Hero of Two Worlds" by Mike Duncan, and it's the history of Lafayette. And when he was 18 years old, he was taken aside and brought into a lodge, a Masonic Freemason lodge in France. He and two other people who were also instrumental in the French Revolution, as well as had their hand in the American Revolution. And the author attributed a lot of that to Freemasonry, putting in the ideals of a Republican thought. And it goes hand in hand with what you've been writing and you've been talking about tonight, John. Right. It does have great influence in the past. Very important.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that both Freemasons and anti-Freemasons have tended to exaggerate the power of Freemasonry in the past for their own interests. The Italian case is very interesting. Again, post-unification Italy, you have, I forget how many, it's about 11 Masonic prime ministers. There's a lot, Masonic lodges act as not political parties, but kind of debating societies. And it's where you go if you're a politician to kind of get your ideas across. Remember, Italy wasn't a democracy at this stage. It had a very restricted electorate. But they couldn't agree with very much, apart from the fact that they hated the Catholic Church, Freemasons in this period. But what happened later is that people like Mussolini, the fascist dictator, identified Freemasonry with that old liberal regime that he didn't like, and therefore exaggerated the power of Freemasonry, the power that it had over politics and over the institutions for his own aims, because, his first act as a dictator was to ban Freemasonry because that made him look like the enemy of the old elite, the old corrupt elite. So, and by the same tokens, Freemasons themselves would use it as a kind of recruiting tool. This is how powerful we are, and so on and so forth. So it becomes a kind of game where nobody has a stake in really sitting back and saying, well, hang on, really, come on,
John, as the only Italian here, I'm going to try to get us back to the topic that we've derailed from about the Freemasons and the Mafia. And, and in fact, I just signed up to go see or hear a lecture in a couple weeks. And it's all about, what happened in 1982 about a bandit being hanged from a bridge. That's what this whole...
Blackfriars Bridge.
Yeah. So was that the first time that Freemasonry had really reared its head in Italy in a while, in a bad way? or that confuse everything with the Catholic
Okay,
Church.
we need to take it. Funny enough, you look on my website, www.johndickie.net. Actually, it's not my website. It's on my YouTube channel. There's some videos I shot in London, and one of them is the scene where that guy, the banker, Roberto Calvi, who was a member of the P2 Masonic Lodge, was found hanging by his neck in Blackfriars Bridge. And it's a murky story. And it isn't directly associated with the mafia. Although it's thought that people like Calvi and another banker who was in the P2 Lodge were laundering money. In fact, they definitely were. A guy called Sindona was laundering money, drug money for the Sicilian mafia, among other nefarious activities. But there's a more illustrative case. This P2 Masonic Lodge, it was a Masonic Lodge. It was part of the Grand Orient of Italy. It has a long history that goes back to the 19th century. And it's a story that I tell, how this catastrophe overcame the Grand Lodge of Italy because of its dreams of returning to the days when it was really powerful, or when it thought it was really powerful in the late 19th century. But there's a more, in a way, a more interesting case going on that is more directly links the mafia and the Freemasons. And this is what I was having this debate about in Italy with a prosecutor in front at this festival in Calabria. And basically there's this huge trial. It's gone on for years, which is based, the two key pieces of evidence, a phone tap in which a mafia boss, a very important mafia boss, said the 'Ndrangheta doesn't exist anymore. The 'Ndrangheta is the name of the Calabrian mafia, okay, much more powerful than Cosa Nostra now. The 'Ndrangheta doesn't exist anymore. There's Freemasonry. It's Freemasonry that runs everything. Okay. And if you're a prosecutor, an anti-mafia prosecutor, you're going, what? Second thing is statements by one of the former Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Italy, who testified that he had been told by somebody now dead that almost all of the Masonic lodges, Grand Orient Masonic lodges in Calabria had been taken over by the mafia, by the 'Ndrangheta. Now, at the end of several years of trial, it's hectic stuff, we get to two findings. One, that this Grand Master guy didn't know what the hell he was talking about, and it was hearsay, and somebody was probably just pulling his chain, because there was nothing, no sense that, this wholesale takeover of Freemasonry by the 'Ndrangheta. And the second thing is that the mafia boss who said the Freemasons had taken over everything was talking in metaphors. It's a metaphor. Like most people in Italy, Masonry is a metaphor. It means it's a dirty lobby, it's a clique.
The good old boys. Yeah.
It's good old boys. It's a little elite who run things from behind the scenes. And what he meant was actually a particular power group within the 'Ndrangheta who'd taken over. Okay, a kind of who were members of the mafia like everybody else, and they weren't Freemasons. One of them was. Had taken it, and it was a metaphor. And because of this metaphor, we've had books written about, the Masons are taking over, and the Masons and the mafia, and Italy's standing parliamentary commission of inquiry into the mafia hauled in the leaders of Italian Freemasonry and say, we want to confiscate your membership list because we've got to, who are you hiding? What's going on? Crazy, crazy stuff. That said, in the chaotic panorama, in Italy, literally, you get people getting around a table at dinner and saying, hey, let's set up a Masonic lodge, get on the internet, plagiarize some rituals and stuff. And we're Masons for whatever reason you want. There's a kind of anarchy there. And, some of that Masonic activity is certainly dodgy. Right. Really dodgy. You have it in America with some of these lodges. I mean, Prince Hall Freemasonry is particularly badly affected by this. Some of them are just, rip-off schemes, basically. These illegitimate forms of Prince Hall Freemasonry.
Right.
Spurious versions. In Italy, some of them are connected to organized crime. But that's very, very different from this kind of great alliance between the Freemasons and the mafia that they'd started off imagining. So it's a crazy story, yet another story of the kind of misunderstandings and weirdness that Freemasonry has given rise to throughout its history. This didn't start yesterday.
Well, I would just like to say that I would very much like to believe that the leaders of Freemasonry could all get together and decide something, because there is no taking over the world. They can't decide on who to admit and who not to admit. So
in a 50-mile radius, they can't agree to not have events on the same day, so that those of us that live in between, we can't go to both.
Yeah, only so many chicken barbecues.
As I get it, that's half the fun, isn't it? All the disagreements and stuff like that. Isn't that what people get into it for? I don't know.
It's getting there, but the internet is turning into a tabloid now. It's just awful.
Yeah.
We talked about that a little bit on our last episode. It's just, do we really need to talk about this on the internet? Probably not. Anyway, well, let's take another quick break and we'll come back and close out with John, and we'll be right back.
As far back as the mid-1800s, records exist describing the pre-meeting tradition of brethren smoking cigars during and after gatherings. To this day, the practice of smoking cigars remains very much alive in many lodges. This custom is considered a time for brethren to relax, exchange ideas, and enjoy the simplicity and fellowship that is the very essence of our brotherhood. This is what Hiram Solomon Cigars is all about. Our starting principles are to bring Masonic brethren together in the harmony of a good cigar. Pull up a chair, sit back, light up any of our premium cigars, and enjoy the history. Hiram Solomon Cigars can be found at fine cigar retailers. For a complete list, visit HiramSolomonCigars.com or check them out on social media to find out when they'll be at a live event near you. Hiram Solomon Cigars is pleased to be the official cigar of the Masonic Light Podcast.
And we're back with Brother John Dickie. Not brother, sorry. Sounds like a brother. He probably knows more about the fraternity than I do. Professor John Dickie. So, John, take us onto a little bit into American Freemasonry. Take us across the pond.
Well, Freemasonry is the most the land where Freemasonry has really found its home, its second home. It's extraordinary, astonishing success, particularly in that long golden age that I took, really about a century from the Civil War onwards, when it became so fundamental to American life, and spawned all kinds of imitators, the whole world of American fraternalism, which is an amazing phenomenon. It's one of the crazy and fascinating things about American society for people looking from the outside. Its ability to generate, organizations and its charitable giving and its, all that sort of area between the state, between the government and the family that they refer to as civil society organizations. And it's one of the really fascinating things about America. And Freemasonry is the motor of that. It's right at the heart of that. And that's a really, really important story to tell. But like so Freemasonry says so much about America, I think. That's why Washington picked it as his, kind of ceremonial language. When George Washington wanted to speak in a gravelly voice to posterity, he got the Masons involved to, in the stone, like the cornerstone layings and so on and so forth, because that was when America was showing itself to the world and showing itself, as I said, to posterity in the light of eternity as something great and permanent. And the church couldn't do that function, America being the society is. So, hey presto, call the Freemasons. And that really set America going. But of course, Freemasonry, like America, bears the scars of slavery and its legacy and so on and so forth. And the whole story of the, Prince Hall Masonry and white mainstream Masonry is really it's like looking at American society through a kind of Masonic keyhole. And it's fascinating in that way. For an external observer like me.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think, and I'm sure this is probably the case in Freemasonry across the world. It's a snapshot of the society that they exist in, and certainly America is no different.
The poignancy of it, though, the thing that makes it a gripping story for me is that Freemasonry aspires to be better than that.
Right.
And has this kind of DNA of Enlightenment values within it. And that's what makes it into a particularly tragic story in a way, but also a story with elements of hope in it and so on and so forth. So, that's why both as a historian, if you like, as a writer, I was attracted to the kind of power of all of that.
Your book comes across that way, that it is its own duality, that it's got these Enlightenment conceptions, and yet we're still oppressing whole segments of population and colonizing and enslaving and all that sort of thing. But what you managed to do in the book, I think, is to demonstrate the balance of that. Both, on an event by event basis, but also globally. You can see the sort of the tidal change, but it's slow. But you present.
To be fair, I tried to give the Brits a bit of a hard time as well over, the empire and everything like that.
You really want to pick on somebody, pick the Australians, because they can't even play back.
Well, Jack, it sounds like the parade has arrived at your house.
Oh, can you hear it? Okay. Sorry.
I heard drumming in the background. They're coming for you.
They are. It's the best. They're all wearing aprons too. It's great.
Mm.
Well, if my sound is being bad, I'll mute myself.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm sure everybody will enjoy it if I mute myself.
Yeah. Well, John, why don't you tell our listeners, you alluded to a website earlier. Why don't you share with our listeners where they might find more about you and your work? And
Sure. The website is www.johndickie.net. And my name is spelled Dickie. And that's got information about all my books, the various TV programs I've made, and reviews of the craft, more material about it, links to media interviews, other funny stuff. You can kind of try before you buy.
Links to podcasts? Do you have links to podcasts on there?
Yeah, I have links to podcasts, and if you supply me a link, I'll shove it up there as well. If you
told to shove it before,
say that, did you say that in America? I'm
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
I can't see it.
We don't want another whole butt introduced into
we don't want another whole butt. That's for
sure.
If you get an alert from your bank, I just bought the book on Kindle, Amazon. So
superb. Yeah, my agent is ringing me now to congratulate me.
Good. I was going to loan it to you, but I won't now.
I felt bad when Larry didn't pay for it either. I mean, yeah, it's a compliment that like you share a book, but I mean, the professor got to eat.
You also mentioned a YouTube channel. Can that be found just by looking up?
Yeah. I think there's various things on the YouTube channel, but most of them. I'm also on Twitter. John Dickie. You'll find me. But yeah, the YouTube channel, I did a series under, lockdown conditions when all I could do to publicize the book was wander the streets of London. I made a series of little films about curious and interesting places in London that are in Masonic history. And some of them are really weird and really striking, including an electrical gadget shop on the Edgware Road, number 25 Edgware Road, which is responsible for starting the whole history of paranoia about Freemasonry and conspiracy theories. It's where the first modern conspiracy theory was born.
Wow, that's great.
You didn't visit Jack the Ripper's house, I hope.
There is a Masonic conspiracy about Jack the Ripper. Very important one.
Yeah.
Very important one.
Yeah.
Which is briefly mentioned because guy set in motion a whole load. You know the film, what's it called? From Hell. It's based on this really spooky graphic novel, really good graphic novel, which in turn is based on this paranoid conspiracy theorist journalist's book. That basically Jack the Ripper was a Freemason and the Masons covered his tracks, which makes perfect sense because why else would we not know who he is?
That's right. Exactly.
Except for the fact that we're really terrible at keeping secrets.
Yeah.
Wherever two or three are gathered. Yeah.
Right.
That is absolutely true.
Well, John, thank you so much for being with us this evening. It's been quite a joy to have you here, having read your book during my vacation this year. I love any book that causes me to think more and to want to engage in conversations about topics. And your stories in your book did that easily. And Pete will join the club of those of us who have read it very soon, I'm sure. So, but
that's great. I hope you got a few laughs out of it as well.
I sure did.
And thank you for being accessible, John. It's not always the case that people are willing to stay up. I know you're in the UK right now, so it's getting awfully late for you. But we thank you very much for being accessible and being a great guest.
My great pleasure. It's been huge fun.
Hello, brethren. Dutchie Doug is back with an update from my lodge, the Brogan Plough number 377. I was recently sitting on my porch and was thinking about just how colorful our Pennsylvania Dutch language is. Our mother tongue is full of great idioms. Now, I take it that all of you know what an idiom is. And no, not an idiot, an idiom. We all know our fair share of idiots. The Pennsylvania Dutch language is a language of the working people. For generations, we have been engaged in agriculture, and our language greatly reflects the down-to-earth wisdom of a people that are not afraid to get their hands dirty and know the meaning of an honest day's work. So this month, I decided to share with all of you a few sayings from our language and to try to give examples of them at play in our Masonic journeys. Here we go. Idiom number 1. Gut gedo is besser als gut gezahlt. Well done is better than well said. Now, we all know that some of our brethren talk a good game. I'll sign up to help. I'll take such and such a part. And then they don't show up. Or they show up and don't know their lines for the degree. Ay, that burns me up. Do it right, or don't do it at all, gell? Idiom number 2. Med os provera findt man nix os. Without trying, one learns nothing. Now this idiom is a good one. We have all been there. Whether it was learning a part for a degree, or agreeing to chair a committee, or just helping out with the pancake breakfast. Until we actually put ourselves into action, we learn nothing. We must act, not just think about it. Through our actions, and most importantly our mistakes, do we truly learn. Idiom number 3. Was man net im Kopf hat man in the fees. What is not in the head must be in the feet. Now at first you might think that this idiom is making fun of people who aren't educated, but I don't see it that way. When we look at our fraternity, we are comprised of men from all walks of life. We must embrace and lift up our various gifts that the Supreme Architect of the universe has bestowed upon us. Yes, some of us are able to memorize paragraphs and paragraphs of ritual, but that alone will not keep a lodge alive. We also need to recognize those brethren who quote-unquote clean out the manure. And you know exactly who I mean. The brethren that mow the lodge's grass, or clean the snow from the sidewalks. The brethren that are always there in the kitchen helping with a meal, or picking up a homebound brother and bringing him to lodge. A lodge that celebrates all of our gifts is a lodge that not only survives, but grows. Last but not least, idiom number 4. Ein kleiner Boss macht viel Sache recht. A little kiss makes many things right. For those of us brethren that are married, don't forget to show your honey some appreciation for supporting you in all of your Masonic endeavors. I never forget to kiss my wife before I leave for a meeting, and I always kiss her when I get home, no matter how late it is and whether she wants me to or not. Hopefully one of these idioms spoke to you. Our language has many, many more that maybe I'll share with all of you in the future. But till next time, work hard, stay plumb, and on the lights when you leave the room. To learn more about the Pennsylvania Dutch language, culture, and history, please visit my website, padutch101.com, or my YouTube channel. Just search Doug Maidenford.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Great episode so far with Professor John Dickie. And I think we're gonna wrap this show up because I have no idea what I'm saying. So, what do you guys got coming up, Tim?
Well, the day after this show drops on the 28th, I will be joining Robert Burns Lodge for their banquet. Must have done a halfway decent job. I got invited to their banquet. Eureka West Shore Lodge's banquet will be coming up just prior to this dropping, so I'm sure we had a great time. Next, the Friday after this, Lucius Securitas AMD Council will be meeting, having a great time. It's one of my favorite Masonic groups. And then on the 4th of October, the stated meeting of Eureka West Shore Lodge for October, we'll be recognizing 25-year service award recipients. And I'm not sure what else, but lots of good things going on. So that is that. And Jack, how about you?
I got nothing.
You got nothing?
My bubble burst when Lodge in the Wood was over. I'm on
sabbatical.
I'm on Masonic life support right now.
All right. Okay, Josh, how about you?
Not the usual trying to be worshipful master stuff and keeping Larry in line. He keeps putting off this merger committee stuff, but
he's such a slacker.
Yeah.
Pete, what about you?
So obviously the Pennsylvania Grotto Association, when that's done, hopefully I can just pass the gavel and I'm done with that business for a while. I got a piece of mail the other day. I'm wondering if Larry got one too. Dear brother Pete, you are invited to participate in our fall reunion. November 20th. So the Valley of Reading, the fall reunion is going to be Saturday, November 20th. And apparently, Brother Herb Swisher, 33rd degree, has decided that I should be in the 6th, 16th, and 32nd degrees.
Wow. Well, they're desperate.
The good news is 5 lines, 0 lines, and 4 lines. So I think I can handle it.
I'm on the 6th degree, 16th, and 17th, and I'm only going to do the 17th. So I got the same thing.
All right. Did we miss anybody? Larry? Are you the last one?
We didn't do Larry. You do anything, Larry?
Larry, yeah, we're going to finish up with Larry, and then we'll dub the chickens.
Oh,
Go,
well,
Larry.
yeah. One of the things I wanted to say, I forgot to say it earlier. I did attend the Richard Dreyfuss Civics lecture. Did any of you?
Oh, did you?
He was fantastic, and I hope that they make that video available for Masonic lodges and for anybody to be able to see, because
did you book him for the show?
No,
you had
actually,
one job.
You had one job.
Is this like Close Encounters of Third Kind, Richard Dreyfuss?
Yes, that Richard Dreyfuss, the actor. Yeah,
Jaws.
He's a 32nd degree. Yeah, he's everything. I mean, he's not a liberal. He's not a conservative. He's in the middle of
that's why I haven't seen him in anything in 15 years.
Yeah, that's
Oh my
gosh. The thing about him, though, is he has appeared on Fox. So take that for.
He can't be a liberal if he appeared on Fox, right?
They have
I don't even know where to go with that. All right, cue the chickens.
His lecture civics is phenomenal.
Get us out of here. I got to call.
Yeah. Josh, dub the chickens. Larry, get us out of here.
Dubstep chickens.
Okay. Hey, special thanks to 665 for their beautiful making our beautiful studio. Well, you don't know what I mean. I've said it enough.
Beautiful butt.
Special thanks to Josh Lamberton.
Whoa.
Here's
Harley, our news director, and Tim Dedman, our marketing director, Michelle Snyder, and Douglas Madden. We'll see Doug on Sunday, by the way.
Are we going to hear from any of the strangers?
What?
Are we going to hear from any of the strangers? Like a certain Moyer, if you will?
Yeah, he said he was going to call in. That's why I'm launching.
Okay. Yeah, I heard from him. He's getting with me. He was up for weeks. So,
he was where?
He was at hunting camp up in the North Woods for weeks at a time.
Jeez, he was in high heels for weeks. I didn't know.
He was up there for 2 or 3 weeks in a shot. He's going back up again for 3 more weeks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the rumors of him being in rehab are untrue.
All right, so it's time to say goodbye.
Thanks for listening. This is Larry. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
I didn't curse once tonight.